President Barack Obama promises a transparent investigation of the Afghan hospital bombing. With people the world over living longer, how will societies have to change to accommodate older populations? And a big announcement from Facebook will have a big impact on the continent. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Barack Obama has promised a thorough and transparent investigation into the bombing of a field hospital in Afghanistan that killed 22 people inside, including 3 children. In a phone call Wednesday, the president apologized to the head of Doctors Without Borders for the Kunduz bombing. He also called Afghanistan's president to express condolences for the civilian deaths. VOA's Laditza Hoke has more.
President Obama on Wednesday called Doctors Without Borders International President Joanne Liu to apologize and express his condolences for the loss of staff and patients.
The president assured Dr. Liu that the Department of Defense investigation currently underway would provide a transparent, thorough, and objective accounting of the facts and circumstances of the incident, and that, if necessary, the president would implement changes that would make tragedies like this one less likely to occur in the future.
Doctors Without Borders said it wants an independent investigation of the bombing because it cannot trust the impartiality of U.S., NATO, and Afghan military investigations.
We are calling on President Obama to consent to the fact-finding commission. Doing so will send a powerful signal of the U.S. government's commitment to and respect for international humanitarian law and the rules of war. This is not only about the deaths of our staff and patients in Kunduz, it is about the safety and security of our medical teams around the world working in conflict zones.
Paris-based Doctors Without Borders says 10 patients and 12 staff members were killed in the bombing and more than 30 people were wounded.
I have a wounded family member who has a bullet stuck in his leg, and we have another wounded family member whose wound hasn't been stitched yet.
With the hospital gone, tens of thousands of people in Kunduz are left without adequate medical care.
There are no more good hospitals. When there is no hospital, we don't know where to take the patients and the wounded.
Afghanistan's military has said it believed Taliban insurgents were firing from inside the medical facility, and it asked for U.S. air support. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
On to Africa now. Rwanda's Supreme Court ruled on Thursday that President Paul Kagame could run for a third 7-year term, rejecting an attempt by the main opposition party to block changes to the country's constitution. The opposition Democratic Green Party, which brought the case before the Supreme Court, said it would continue to push for protection of existing constitutional term limits. Although Kagame has not said explicitly that he wants to run again, he has made clear he is open to persuasion. The parliament backed a motion in July to let him run again as leader of the East African state. The constitutional changes to allow a third term must, however, pass a referendum. The Kigali court ruling is likely to attract attention in other African nations where term limits are under similar pressure. Now, for more perspective on the developments in Rwanda, David Himbara, an analyst and political economist, joins me via phone from Toronto, Canada. David, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your show. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now, Mr. Paul Kagame would say, well, the people want me to run. The court seems to be in agreement. Is that a valid position?
Well, first of all, let's talk quickly about how we have arrived here. The government of Rwanda, Kagame, says that about almost 4 million people signed a petition for him to stay in power. The Senate in Rwanda voted by 100% in support. Parliament voted by 99% in support of changing the constitution. And then the senators and parliamentarians that went around the country soliciting views from citizens, they found only 4 people in the entire population opposed. So in other words, really the whole exercise is academic, because if 4 million people out of 5 million and 5.8 million voters have voted, have petitioned that they want Kagame, Senate voted by 100%, Parliament voted by 99%, and then the Constitutional Court says it's all okay. Well, it seems that it's a done deal. The only question is this a credible exercise?
Okay.
I think not.
Now, how about the fact that even the court said this has to go to referendum, which means that the citizens at the end of the day must have a say. Do you take comfort in that?
No, but the citizens, according to Kagame, have already had a say. 4 million of them petitioned. So what would the referendum do? Mm-hmm. Remember, there are the Rwandan population of 11 million. The adult population is 5.8 million. So 4 million, it's claimed, signed the petition. Parliament and all of them signed off. So what would the purpose be? The purpose of the referendum be?
Here's the question. Mr. Kagame has been credited with building the nation after the genocide. What could a third term do to his legacy? Briefly.
Well, that's exactly the question. Remember that he has been in power. First of all, he was the power behind the scenes from 1994 to 2000. Then from 2000 he became president up to now, up to 2017. He have served almost 20 years. So what indeed can he possibly do that he hasn't done?
All right. That's a good place to end our conversation for today. We'll continue this. David, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. David Himbara, an analyst and political economist, joined us via phone from Toronto in Canada. He's a native of Rwanda, actually. Now, the leaders of Germany and France have called for unity across Europe to address a series of crises facing the continent. In their speeches to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, Germany Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande said that more cooperation was needed to settle tens of thousands of migrants and refugees arriving in the 28-member bloc. Meanwhile, the European Union started a new operation in the southern Mediterranean Sea to intercept human trafficking boats trying to enter the bloc illegally. Reports say more than 130,000 migrants have crossed to Europe from North African coast this year, but 2,700 of those are believed to have drowned while making the dangerous journey. Now, in his hope to help save lives, a marine salvage expert from the Isle of Wight has invented an inflatable tube device to help people at sea. His name is Ben Board, and he joins us now via Skype from the city of Cowes. Ben, welcome to Africa 54.
Good afternoon, or good evening as it is here.
Right, thanks. Good evening. Question is, first, how did this idea pop up in your head?
Well, we started off by being approached by a friend of the company's to build a product that could be inflated quickly and deployed quickly over the side of ships passing and transiting the area. We managed to make 2 of them, and we passed them out to Migrant Offshore Aid Station, or MOAS. They were donated by our company. We then moved on to build a further 2 that we've given them to MSF, and they've been used to great effect, which then moved me to start a funding page to raise some money to build some more, which we've now done.
Now, we know that there are already boats that are being sent to sea to help those who are in danger of drowning. How does your device help with those boats in place?
Well, as you can imagine, these boats are overloaded with 300 or 400 people. So the idea was to come up with a very simple tube with grab handles on it to give the rescuers in the smaller boats time to get everybody out of the water. And so we've developed a very, very simple tube. It's 16 meters long. It's half meter in diameter, and it has rope handles capable of holding up to 60 people at a time down the sides.
Now, how does somebody who perhaps is already in the water really get help from this device?
Well, they're able to. the problem is with these boats that the migrants are put in is that they sink very quickly, or they capsize, and there's nothing to hold on to. So what we've done is built a device that gives them, allows the rescuers to give them time to hold on to these devices while they're pulling them out of the water.
Okay. So what is your vision for the future in terms of perhaps how to use it even more beneficially?
Well, we're developing it all the time. We've actually come to a point now where we can actually very simply clip these things together, because we supply them in pairs. So they can be clipped together and people can be lifted out of the water. So children and the weak and the needy can be lifted out of the water quickly, which gives them a better chance of survival, which is, as we've all seen these dreadful pictures of people drowning.
Very quickly, how many have embraced this in terms of organizations and governments?
Well, we're talking to people all the time. The two major people we're talking to at the moment are MOAS and MSF, but we're talking to the Greek Coast Guard, the Navy, the British Navy, all sorts of people trying to get these floats out there to help.
Thank you very much. Anything that can save more lives, Ben, we appreciate your insights.
Thank you for the call.
You're welcome. Ben Board joining us from the city of Cowes in the Isle of... from the Isle of Wight. Now, I proposed, or as promised, we bring you now part 2 of our interview with former chairman of Nigeria's Electoral Commission, Professor Atahiru Jega. So what advice does he have for Africa's electoral commissions? Africa 54's Esther Githu-Yuwat is here to tell us more. Esther?
Vincent, as you know, in some African countries, electoral commissions are viewed with suspicion, and in some cases, they are used by incumbent governments to ensure their stay in power. Electoral commissions around the world have an enormous task of ensuring free, fair and credible elections. However, in some African countries, that has not been the case. I asked Professor Jega, former chairman of Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, what his advice would be to Africa's electoral commissions.
My advice, first and foremost, will be that electoral commissions should do everything possible to be non-partisan and to also be seen to be non-partisan. And they should do everything possible to ensure professionalism in the way in which they manage and conduct elections.
The last elections in Ivory Coast were marred by chaos that divided the country. The Central African country of Burundi was embroiled in election violence, and the unrest continues. Professor Jega weighs in on incumbents who refuse to concede defeat and employ tactics to remain in power even when the votes indicate otherwise.
In terms of ensuring that we bring to an end or remarkably minimize the tendency of African leaders to want to hold on to power by hook or by crook, or to use the power of incumbency to either postpone an election or defy an election or actually extend tenure. Because these are really incompatible with the principles of democracy and the aspirations of Africans for good governance.
This former INEC chairman says electoral commissions must also ensure voter inclusivity through programs that target marginalized groups and the physically challenged.
Electoral commissions all over Africa need to pay attention to voter education, to sensitization and public enlightenment, because inclusiveness and participation of citizens in elections is very, very important for the governance process.
Professor Jega was speaking at the U.S. Senate building at the invitation of the International Foundation of Electoral Systems, IFES. IFES President William Sweeney says his foundation will be closely watching upcoming elections in Guinea, Ivory Coast and Tanzania.
This is one of the best practices that IFES has implemented around the world as a way of making the election experience all the better from a managerial and a voter's perspective in elections going forward.
Professor Atahiru Jega has been credited with the successful and historic 2015 elections in Nigeria. Now, former INEC chairman says getting stakeholders to be firm in their demands for democracy and transparency during elections will go a long way and make it difficult for despots and authoritarians to have their way. Vincent?
Well, thank you very much, Esther. Now we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, how will societies adapt to cope with aging populations? Stay with us. Joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu. Lino.
Hello, Vincent. Well, a new study shows that ovarian transplants are a safe and effective way for women who have had cancer to have their own children. Danish doctors offered the procedure to 32 women whose cancer therapy had left them at risk of infertility. Patients had their ovaries frozen before cancer treatment began. Their own ovarian tissue was then reimplanted once they were well. 10 women went on to have successful pregnancies. Though ovary freezing and transplantation is available in the UK, well, it is not common, partly because of concerns that transplants could carry cancerous cells. The study was published in the journal Human Reproduction. The World Health Organization says with advances in medicine helping more people to live longer lives, the number of people over the age of 60 is expected to double by 2050 and will require radical societal changes. In a new report, the World Health Organization raises the alarm on the state of health of aging populations globally.
The World Report on Aging and Health is crucial because populations around the world are rapidly aging, and we need to make sure that as we develop as a cohesive and equitable society, that older people are a core part of that. We also need to frame how we can ensure that their rights are respected, particularly their right to health.
Successes in dealing with childhood disease and maternal mortality are some reasons why people are living longer. But the report finds that there is very little evidence that the added years of life are being experienced in better health than was the case for previous generations at the same age. Alana Officer is Senior Health Advisor of Aging and Life Course Department with WHO.
So the report tells us that populations are rapidly aging. But it also tells us, very importantly, that we are not necessarily healthier today than our parents and grandparents.
Observers say some older people from more advantaged segments of society may be experiencing both longer and healthier lives. However, people from disadvantaged backgrounds, those in poorer countries with fewer resources, are likely to have the poorest health and the greatest need. Dr. Bird says realigning health systems to the needs of older people will be crucial in ensuring them a healthier life.
Well, there's a lot of practical things that can be done, and that can be in the rich world or in the poorer world. For example, health systems need to reframe the way they look at an older person when they present, and instead of responding to each disease independently, they need to consider the person as a whole and identify what's the best way of improving their functioning.
The WHO report rejects the stereotype of older people as frail and dependent. It says the many contributions that older people make are often overlooked, while the demands that population aging will place on society are frequently overemphasized or exaggerated. The report stresses that, among other things, governments need to develop long-term care systems that can reduce inappropriate use of acute health services and ensure people live their last years with dignity. Joining us via Skype from London for more on the subject is Claire Woodford, Health Policy Advisor at Help Age International. Claire, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Hello.
Hello. First of all, let me ask you, what is your take on the reports in terms of where we stand in caring for the elderly?
Well, I think it's a very influential and it's a very important report, and HelpAge enthusiastically welcomes the report because it embraces a lot of the messages that we've been putting out now for some time, such as that it takes a very holistic and positive view of old age. Instead of looking at what older people can't do, it looks at what older people can do and enabling them to live longer and healthier lives, which is great. Secondly, it talks about the person-centered care, which is really important because we know that there is no typical older person, that sadly for a lot of people when they reach older age they do experience disease, ill health, depression, all those things, but that's not typical, and there are many older people now living healthy long lives. So in terms of framing the response, it's as much about health and also care services, but also transport, looking at the environment in which older people are living as much as just a medical response. And also, I think we'd welcome the real push for data. Too often we don't know the numbers of older people in countries because population level surveys don't collect this information, and so older people become invisible and therefore we can't respond to their needs.
Okay. Now, preventing diseases is very critical in older people, as the report mentioned. Tell us about what are some of the steps?
I think perhaps it's more helpful to actually talk about to refer to what we're talking about here. So largely we're talking about non-communicable diseases, which involve diseases such as stroke, hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease. So diseases that have been real killers in the Western countries, in the UK, in the US for some time, but the health systems and the preventative work has been put in place so that these are now tackled. In poorer, lower and middle income countries, we know that there are not the services in place, the medication, the health prevention work there to stop these diseases progressing as far as they can, so they become killers.
Okay. Now let's talk quickly about the priorities for HelpAge International, especially when it comes to addressing the needs of the elderly in sub-Saharan Africa.
Right. Well, obviously, addressing these non-communicable diseases is a huge part of our health and care strategy. Also, very much working on HIV, which we know leaves so many people in so many families in Africa either orphaned, and as a result of those children are being brought up in a lot of countries by their grandparents, which places a very big role as caregivers on older people. Also, we know that very much connected to that, the level of income that older people receive is not necessarily stable, and in very many cases lower. So we do a lot of work on campaigning for pensions and social protection systems to make sure that older people have a minimum income to protect them and keep them out of poverty. We also do work on humanitarian countries and situations in which countries are vulnerable to disasters and that kind of work.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Woodford, thank you so much for joining us from London. Claire Woodford is Health Policy Advisor at HelpAge International. She was joining us via phone. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, and thank you very much, Lino, for joining us today. Be sure to watch for Lino Mudu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a big announcement from Facebook is good news for the continent. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Nigeria, 3 suicide bombers strike the city of Damaturu, killing at least 18 and wounding 8. In Burkina Faso, after being charged with murder and attacking state security, Burkinabe lawyer says the general behind the recent coup could receive a life sentence. In Kenya, workers update drainage system to control flooding. in preparation for upcoming El Niño, expected to last until January 2016. In Egypt, a former intelligence officer becomes the head of the most influential coalition running in the election, which will be the first parliamentary vote in 3 years. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Young Kenyans reacted with excitement after Facebook announced plans to launch a satellite in partnership with France's Eutelsat Communications to bring internet access to large parts of sub-Saharan Africa. The satellite, part of Facebook's platform to expand internet access mainly via mobile phones, is under construction and will be launched in 2016. The satellite will cover large parts of West, East and Southern Africa. Social media experts say this will be a game changer for the 2.2 million Facebook users in Kenya and the remote population the plan targets. Next up, a Jordanian comedy group gets funky for a serious course.
سيارتي هون قطعت بنزين لازم اغير خطتي شباب طريق طويل لعمان شباب.
The group Folk Al-Sada's parody of the English song Uptown Funk has become a viral hit on YouTube. The song, originally produced by English DJ and producer Mark Ronson and singer Bruno Mars, was used to address the issue of unemployment for the youth in the country. And finally, in other viral news videos, the spontaneous dance moves of Argentine President Cristina Fernández Kirchner during a recent political rally in Buenos Aires have caused an internet sensation. Fernández de Kirchner began to gyrate to the rhythms of a politically themed song at the end of a rally of ruling party of candidate Daniel Sciolo. The dance lasted several minutes, and the president made an open finger salute to the large crowd in attendance. The Kirchner's political movement is quite popular in Argentina, and that's what's trending today. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Esther, and that is our show for today. Just remember to follow up more on our program on our website. And until tomorrow, have a good night.
At stake is the basic human right of the woman and child.
This is a struggle against humanity, and we all need to join hands and do what we can do.
Women are not being heard, so we need to be doing a lot more.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm Sally Field, and I believe women are the best agents of change. These women from around the world are leading the way to challenge the status quo and motivate the next generation.
Let's move on and take a step in this journey.
Access to preventive care information and access to health care is a fundamental right.
It really makes me think about how I can contribute to the next generation.
These women bring us one step closer to realizing women's rights as human rights. Only on VOA.